All right. Yeah. So yeah. Well, I'm very happy and very honored to be invited to talk to you today, and to speak to you, with Barbara, Slovakia, and the friends in the tea mountain of Jingmai. It's a beautiful place. It must be getting closer now to the beginning of the tea season, the harvest.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. Oh, very exciting. All right. So today is I'm going to talk to you about my experiences with Chinese tea culture and my experiences in learning about Chinese tea culture and also becoming an advocate or a disseminator of Chinese tea culture. And that's a journey that really began for me in around 2008, about the time of the Beijing Olympics. And that was a time when I've been traveling to Yunnan for many years, since the early 1990s, but
Wow.
I never really paid much attention to tea. I mean, Yunnan was beautiful. I knew there was lots of tea there, so on. But it was around 2008 that somebody said to me, well, actually, I asked my friend, um, suggest a good topic for me to research in Yunnan, give me more of an excuse to spend time in Yunnan. And they said, why don't you research the ancient tea road, the Chama Gudao?
Oh,
And I said, well, I've never heard of that. That was in 2008. So I wasn't paying much attention. And I was very fortunate that my friend, colleague at it's the Yunnan University of Finance and Economics, it's called now. Yeah. And introduced me to Professor Mu Jihong, who was
wow. Yeah.
one of the scholars who
Hmm.
came up with the concept of the ancient tea horse road around 1990. And he was very kind to me and invited me into his research team. And I traveled with him to various meetings all over Yunnan. And that's why I caught the tea bug. And ever since then, I've just been delving deeper and deeper into Chinese tea. And of course, as you learn more, people ask you questions and you kind of begin to take on this role as a disseminator. I mean, part of my role as a lecturer in a university, and I was director of the Confucius Institute at the University of Western Australia. That was around 2008 as well. And so I've been involved in promoting and sharing Chinese culture with people in Australia and beyond. And so, but now I've got this. Now I've got a window into Chinese culture through tea, and so that's what I'm talking to you about today. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide. Now, probably as we would say, I'm preaching to the converted. You don't need to be converted, you guys, but so bear with me. Now, why should we pay attention to these? So this is how I start. So probably, what I'm doing here today as well also is I'm giving you an example of how I talk to people about tea. And I've done this both in the context of in Australia and also in other places. Where else have I talked about tea? In New Zealand and the United States. And but also I've talked to people in Chinese and English about tea in China as well. So because they're very curious to hear what a foreigner has to say about Chinese tea. So where I start is, why? Why should we pay attention to tea? What's so great? What's so important? What's so significant about tea that it's worthy of our attention? Well, the first place to start is I always start with this quote, the statement that tea is the most popular beverage on the planet after water, of course. And well, what is tea? Tea is 90% water, right? Maybe more than that, but tea is the most popular beverage on the planet, right? There are, every day, billions of people appreciate a cup of tea. They share it with their friends and their family and their colleagues. It's a very important part of our lives. When something becomes so common in your daily life, so ordinary, seemingly, you kind of take it for granted. But I just imagine if suddenly I had to click my fingers and all the tea in the world disappeared. I think pretty quickly, in a day or 2 days, there will be a lot of grumpy people out there in the world going, "Where's my tea?" Okay, we've become habituated to it. So it's so popular. Tea has also played a very profound role in world history. Ever since it started, obviously it started in China, in ancient China, and it radically transformed China over a period of time. And then as Chinese tea spread from China and to the Korean Peninsula, Japan, and Southeast Asia and Central Asia, and so on, all of those peoples who came into contact with tea fell in love with it. They couldn't get enough of it. That's basically the story of tea. It's something that once you come across it and it becomes an habitual part of your life, you can't live without it. You need it all the time. Okay, so that creates a demand. That creates a market. And so the economic side of that also needs to be mentioned. So tea is an important industry in dozens of countries, about 50 countries. There's about 12 or a dozen or so countries where tea is a really important industry. That's like in China, in India, Sri Lanka, Kenya. But there's up to 50 countries where tea is being grown and cultivated and sold at a commercial scale. Some places smaller than others. I mean, for example, probably you don't know that we also have tea plantations in Australia, in New South Wales, northern New South Wales, and Queensland, and even in Western Australia. There is a tea plantation down in the southwest of Western Australia. So tea is really important. Up to 80 million people, according to the some statistics that I've seen, reports from the World Agricultural Organization, from the UN, reporting that up to 80 million people depend on tea for their livelihoods. Those are the tea farmers, the tea workers, the tea merchants, the tea researchers, people who run tea houses, and so on. They depend on tea for their livelihood. 80 million. And as I mentioned before, billions of people, billions of cups every day of tea are being served all around the world. So tea is really important to us. It's shaped the world that we come to know, and it's really important that we understand that history. It has a very positive side to it because tea brings a lot of benefits. But you know, if you dig into the past, there is a bit of a dark side there with wars and so on. But that's part of the story. And it's really important for us to bear this in mind. So that's how I kind of start, trying to get people to when I finish speaking to them, I hope that the next time they look at their cup of tea, they'll think about some of the things that I've been telling them, and they'll begin to think a bit more deeply, mindfully, right? Which is another part of kind of tea culture. Okay, so that's how I start. Why pay attention to tea? Tea is just so important. There are other things I could add to that, but that'll do for now. And some other things will come up as we go along. So I want to also mention that there is a thing that we can call a world tea culture. A world tea culture. So that's very important for us to remember. As I just said, the 50 countries tea is grown, and it's a very important part of the industry. It's the most popular beverage in the world. There is a tea culture. So what do I mean by this? What do I mean by a world tea culture? Well, I'm referring here to the knowledges, the rituals, and the customs that are associated with tea production, the distribution, and the consumption that develop in a specific geographical location over time. The important part of this to realize is that, as I said before, tea, when you start drinking tea, it becomes a habit. You can't live without it, right? What's the Tibetan saying that says they would rather go 3 days without food than 1 day without tea, right? I think a lot of people would appreciate that. It's habitual. We need it. It's a mild stimulant, right? It has that mild stimulant that's so important here. So that's one part of it. Now, when something like that happens, over time, people start to create cultures around their tea consumption. They start to create cultures. So wherever tea goes, it creates culture. It's a culture creating practice, tea consumption. Yeah. So wherever tea is spread, obviously, and it can control more. I mean, the cultures of tea can become very complex and diverse even within one country. And need I say more than look at China? China has a very diverse and rich tea culture. Okay, so now around the world, wherever we look, where tea is really popular and it's been very well established, it has created tea cultures. And over time, some of those cultures, they become a core part of the cultural and the national identity of a people. I can speak on this topic with regards to Australia. Australia, coffee is making inroads, of course, everywhere around the world. That's fine. We're not worried about that. I mean, I drink coffee and it's great, but tea is the thing. But we have a tea culture in Australia that's been developed, and it's a very important part of the Australian identity that began to emerge in the 19th century into the 20th century. And Australians, for a time in the early 20th century, were the most, per capita, the highest consumers of tea from around the world, anywhere in the world. Okay, so that's actually very exciting that we have this kind of world tea culture. It's not monolithic. Okay, the common element is tea, and then the diversity is that so many different places, they have a different ways of brewing the tea, different ways of sharing tea, and so on and so on. Okay, so collectively, all of these things add up to a very diverse world tea culture. And for me personally, I mean, that's a very exciting part of being a part of this kind of tea community and learning about the different tea cultures around the world. I think this kind of exchange of tea cultures and tea knowledges and practices is something that we should really try to concentrate on in the future and build up a conversation among different people around the world based on tea. Because even though there is the diversity in the tea cultures, there are some common elements to tea, which I think we can highlight. Maybe we'll get back to that a bit later. Okay. Now, of course, we need to highlight China's role in this world tea culture. China has a very special place in this world tea culture through its own tea culture, right? And as I mentioned, it is very diverse. When you say, what is Chinese tea culture? Well, you can speak for hours. And I'm still learning. I mean, I've got still many gaps in my knowledge about Chinese tea culture. And very excited that every year when I'm traveling around China, when I start to read a new book on tea or an article or speak to some other tea aficionados and people, disseminators of Chinese tea culture, I learn something new every time. So China is the origin and source of tea and the first tea cultures. And we should always acknowledge that. So China has a very special role to play in all of this. It has the most diverse tea culture of any place in the world, I believe. And also just an amazing diversity in the different kinds of tea. We know there's 6 major categories that are officially recognized, but then there are hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of Chinese tea. It's very exciting to just kind of discover those as you go along. And as tea has developed in China over the millennia, it has integrated with other aspects of Chinese culture, right? And in particular, so for example, in terms of Chinese medicine, Chinese philosophy, the Chinese ways of living, it's been integrated into poetry, into religious practices and Buddhism and Taoism, and so on and so on. So it's really become a very integral part of Chinese culture overall. So actually, when we say that, I'm not joking when we say that Chinese tea is a window into Chinese culture, because if you want to talk about Chinese philosophy, you can talk about Chinese tea. If you want to talk about Chinese views of ecology, the nature, and the humanity's relationship to nature, you can use tea as an example. If you want to talk about the diversity of the ethnic experience in China with its many different ethnic communities, you can also do that through the medium of tea. So tea is a really, really interesting window. And it's something that I think people find very interesting. when you start to tell them about this, because people in the outside, in the Western world and other places, they probably have a very, well, in my experience, they do. Mainly, they do tend to have a very limited understanding of China, because China is so big. 1.3, 1.4 billion people, very, very diverse ethnically and culturally. And so people have a limited understanding of that. It's daunting. But tea is a way to kind of start to pick away at those monolithic views and let people understand that China is a very diverse place and it's so rich in its own cultural history, and it has much to share with the rest of the world and with many different things, not just tea, of course, many different things. But tea is a part of that as well. And it's not, I'm not here just talking about traditional Chinese culture. We can also talk about the modern technologies and the way in which tea is being reinvented and rediscovered with a passion in many places in China. And we know that China's been undergoing a very rapid modernization, and all manner of things are changing very rapidly. Tea is part of that as well. It has a role to play in China's future as well, in terms of its identity and how it relates to the rest of the world. So tea continues to evolve and adapt in the modern world, and that's very exciting. And so, in summary of this particular slide, tea is the perfect medium for telling the story, the China story. We hear much about this at the moment, right? How important it is. And I think that's true. To let people outside world know about China in a friendly, open, and positive way that's diverse and rich and accessible and stimulates interest. And I think tea is an excellent way to do that. Okay. So Chinese tea culture. Yeah, I just mentioned that. There are a few different things that I can highlight as well. So I've talked about the diversity of the local and regional tea cultures in China. That's brilliant. You can travel to different provinces in China, even within a single province. You can experience different aspects of a tea culture. Like even in Yunnan, different minority groups there have slightly different ways of understanding and consuming the tea, and so on and so on. Another element of this, which is very interesting, this is how I got into the tea research in the first place, was through the ancient tea horse road. So this aspect is it's a very important, it's an essential part. You can't tell the story of tea without telling the story of how it was transported, because tea only grows in certain parts geographically, right? You know all that, like where you guys are, the Jingmai Shan, that's where tea, that's the ancient tea trees are there. Tea started in that area. That's its home, native home. But it doesn't grow, in a lot of environments around the world and climates. So it has to be transported. And the story of the transportation of tea is also very fascinating. And so that's what really got me interested in that story. And the reason why I think we can highlight the mobility of the tea is because it tells the story of how tea spread from China to the rest of the world, and how and so through those different modes of transportation, through the tea caravans or through the maritime trade. People, of course, have heard of the Silk Road. I mean, it's very famous. The Silk Road, people have a very romantic view of what the Silk Road is. I tell them, say, well, yeah, that's great, the Silk Road, and I don't want to chip away at the Silk Road's romantic status or anything, and it's Hollywood kind of status. But the tea road is probably more important overall, because tea is such an important. The silk is a luxury, was for a long time. Tea started as a luxury. It always starts when it first reaches a new market. It often starts as a luxury, but over time it becomes more and more popular, and the price drops, and so on and so on. That can't occur without developing very effective methods of transportation. Yeah, okay. And I just found that the tea horse road as well is something that really captures people's attention, because it tells the story of how those muleteers, the caravan people, how they organized the caravans, and they traversed very difficult mountainous terrain day after day, week after week, month after month to get their tea to the tea markets in different parts of China and other parts of the world. So that's an incredible story. And of course, everyone loves tea, but everyone loves horses and our equine friends as well. They're an important part of this as well. Yeah. And so also the other thing as well that I want to highlight is that through all of this, especially I'm talking here within China, we see the development of a distinctly Chinese way of tea, a 中国茶道. Yeah. This is a very interesting part of the research now in China. People are talking about this cha dao very much because we associate obviously this with the Japanese experience, which is great and very unique in many ways and worthy of our attention too. But China being the origin of tea, I think a lot of people now are really thinking about, well, how can we revive what is distinctive about a Chinese way of tea, right? And this is something that I'm investigating myself at the moment, trying to figure out exactly what the Chinese way of tea is, what it means for China, and also what it means for the rest of us and our relationship to tea and Chinese culture. So that's all very exciting. So I got, we could also speak a lot for a long time just about the Chinese way of tea. But just to highlight a few things here, which I think are the essence, for me anyway, of the 中国茶道, the Chinese way of tea. And the first one is, it's the kind of, in Chinese we say 以茶待客, hosting guest with tea. And this really highlights the sociability, the social aspect of tea. Of course, we can drink tea, like I am here today. I have my tea here. I'm drinking a shoupu, from Jingmaishan that Mabel gave to me.
Ganbei, we also drink the red pearl.
Oh, right, yeah, I like it very much. Yeah. So I can drink this by myself, and I do drink tea, when I'm working. It's my companion, as it was for many creative people. Not that I'm in the shoes of some of those great writers and so on. But like in the Western experience, Charles Dickens said he couldn't live without tea. Many famous English writers, they attributed their creativity to their companion of tea, and philosophers and so on. Immanuel Kant, he liked to drink tea when he was working, so on and so on. It's a mild stimulant. It keeps you going. But it's the social aspect, which I think is the really important. Tea brings people together. It brings people together, and they share their experiences. And tea played a very important role, especially in the 19th century, the early 20th century, in the Western countries, and also in Australia, not just Europe, North America, but because tea, and this kind of crossing over into the second element here, the Lao Shao Ji, tea, anyone can drink tea, right? I think I can't think of too many exclusions. Like, you probably wouldn't want to give coffee to somebody who's a bit too young, right? Too much caffeine. They might be overstimulated. But tea's a mild stimulant. You don't have to make it. You can control how much. You can make a weak cup of tea or a strong cup of tea. Everybody can enjoy it, right? It's a mild stimulant. We should always go back to the fact as well that it tastes great, right? It tastes good. We wouldn't drink it if it tasted terrible, like medicine really tastes bitter and horrible. We wouldn't drink it. But tea is very pleasant. We like it, and it's anyone can have it, right? Yeah. So that brings people together. And so unlike something like alcohol, nothing against alcohol again, but too much alcohol, can make you do stupid things and cause you problems. And people don't like it for religious reasons or health reasons or whatever reason. They don't want to drink. Just touch it, right? So tea, the 19th century played a very important role, bringing people together in a safe environment. Women, young people, they could drink tea. No one was going to say, condemn them or anything, saying they were doing anything immoral or whatever. they were just drinking tea. It played a very important part in the development of, kind of independent women's community in the Western countries, certainly. So anyone can have it. So it's really accessible. It's a great. The other part of the social aspect is that human beings, we're social animals. We're social animals. We're in families, clans, communities, and so on and so on. Tea can play a very important role in helping the bonds between the different members of those groups. But also humans like ritual. I mean, when you think about it, our life is surrounded by ritual. You probably, once again, it's one of those things that we're habituated to the different kinds of ritual. So there is, even a very simple. You can when you share tea with somebody, it doesn't have to be so sophisticated or complex or aesthetic. As for example, the Japanese tea ceremony, it can be very simple, but just a very simple ritual is enough for people to feel that they're getting a special experience. And this was actually picked up in research done by some psychologists in America, where they had a group of people. For each person in their group, and they one by one, they gave them 2 cups of tea. The tea was exactly the same, and it was exactly the same. But what they did is they gave the first cup of tea, 1 cup of tea they gave to the participants was just given to them without any ritual. Here's a cup of tea, right? The other one was there was some ritual element involved in the way the tea was presented, served, and then given to the like a guest, and so on. Then the participants were asked afterwards, which tea did they enjoy more? Which tea did they think was better? And 99% said it was the tea that was a part of the ritual. The tea was exactly the same. It just goes to show how important the ritual elements are in our lives. And so tea is and because the way that we brew the tea, or the paraphernalia that we use to make the tea, the teacups and the teapots, all this, people go crazy about all the paraphernalia, the tea things that you can collect, all part of the kind of ritual experience. People really dig that. They really get into it. They really love it, and they really feel like when you have a beautiful, your Chinese chai, the tea ceremony, we'll call it. When somebody's presenting, they're very beautifully dressed. They've got a beautiful tea house, or even just in the nature, right? In nature is also very nice. You've got the presentation is beautiful. You've got somebody very carefully who knows how to brew the tea very well, to respect the tea, and then present the tea very, very mindfully to the person, to the guest. It feels great. So that's very important. So that's a part of the Chinese way of tea. The other element here is, the third one is nature and humanity unite. 天人合一. This is actually, this once again, you could speak on any of these topics for many hours. The 天人合一 is very important because think about tea, the tea. What is it? Well, it's just a leaf. It's just a plant. It's a shrub, right? Or maybe a tree. Some grow into trees, right? Like in Jingmaishan, tea trees. But they're just trees. If you're fortunate enough, you live in a nice environment, there are trees and plants everywhere. What's so special about tea? Well, I've already gone into the reasons why it's special. But the other part of the story of tea is, yes, it is a plant. Okay, it's a part of an ecological environment, and humans, we are part of an ecological environment, and actually, we share the same ecological environment, the world ecology. And we know now that the world's climate, the world is facing some very serious environmental challenges, climate challenges, and it's going to impact on tea. It's going to impact on lots of things. Part of the story of tea now, I see, this is kind of like a new development, is that we can use, and Jingmaishan is a beautiful place because it's the World Heritage listed for us. It is it's a classic, it's probably the essential example of 天人合一 in Jingmaishan. But you can probably find, there are many other places in China too, but it's recognized for that from its world heritage. And so tea, the part of this tea story now is to inform people like, we love tea. We can't live without tea. We have to recognize that tea is a part of the ecology. We are a part of that. The ecology is facing problems. We don't want anything to happen to our tea. What are we going to do about it? Well, first of all, we need to understand what's going on. So tea can also be a window into that side of our contemporary world as well. And we can spin it around into a positive way to say, like, look in China, in many places they grow tea in a very ecologically and sustainable manner, both in terms of the ecology and also in terms of the cultures as well. So we need to kind of understand that and spread that message far and wide, so that we can all make sure that the future generations, they have, not only do they have the tea in their teacups, but they have the tea in their tea mountains as well. Okay, so that's 天人合一. And the next one is self-cultivation leads to world peace. Maybe this is what we call in English drawing a long bow. Maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration. I don't know. But I feel like I got this, so this is a very kind of like, I mentioned Buddhism and Taoism, Confucianism. It's a very important part of Chinese culture. And it's a very Confucian idea here. But also something that you kind of relate to other systems of thought in China. 修身齐家治国平天下. Everything starts with yourself, with your own self-cultivation, right? And your awareness. That's the big contribution, I think, of the Buddhist contribution to the Chinese, the Cha Chang Yi Wei, to tea culture. It's that mindfulness and using tea as a way to become mindful. As I said, to become mindful about ecology, but of course it could be used just to become mindful about so many different things. And the ritual can be very simple, right? With your friends and family. It doesn't have to be, like the Japanese tea ceremony or something that's going to like make you enlightened or something like that. But the self-cultivation leads to being an awareness of your community, and then of the place that you call your nation, and then to the broader kind of concept of the world, which in Chinese, in this saying, we have 天下, which is a very Chinese way of understanding the world. And it's recently, this actually, it's not me just saying this, there is actually, the Chinese government has been promoting a program called 茶和天下. And I translate this roughly as tea bringing peace to the world. Okay, 茶和天下. So yeah, tea plays a very important part, and this is also an important element of the Chinese way of tea. And of course, in that phrase I mentioned, the 茶和天下, we have that character, the word 和, harmony, which is, I mean, if you want to talk about Chinese philosophy or Chinese approaches to the way of living and family and the environment, this idea of harmony, it's really important. And it's captured in the saying, 以和为贵, which pops up all the time when you start reading things about Chinese culture and Chinese philosophy. Whether you read them in English or Chinese, or I imagine other languages, it's going to pop up all the time. It's so important. And so, I left that to the last of the list because if you go back and think about what I was just saying, the 和 is actually in all of those. Maybe it's not mentioned in 以茶代客. Well, there's no 和 there explicitly, but it is, because when you're with the host and the guest, well, you want to have a harmonious kind of relationship when you're drinking the tea, right? Okay. And the same for good and old. When you've got different people in your community or your family or your schoolmates. Hello? Yep.
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, you couldn't hear me?
Yeah.
It's okay now?
Okay, now.
So you couldn't hear me. Hello, Dr. Gary. Just now I had a call, so the signal was off, but now the signal is okay now. Can you hear us again?
I can hear you well. Yeah.
Good. Yes.
Actually, this my teacup has peacocks on it. See?
Peacock.
What's on it?
What's
Oh my god，我们太远了，我实在是看不清。
千里江山图吗？
真的吗？
Wow, that's wonderful.
那我用不是画，没我看得见。
I don't.
放大。
you're the
你
copy
要把那个
the
镜头
screen
放大一点，
small.
把那个镜头放大一点，我们这样
放不大，
看一点。
放不大。
哦，
Okay, so now I want to say a few words about speaking now to all of you, right? And I understand from Mabel that you're well, maybe you've been studying it and you're in the Chinese tea industry and culture already. Maybe you're new to it. You're learning. You started on your tea journey, as I say. Everyone's on a tea journey. Even the masters of the tea masters that are on their tea journey. We all have a role to play, and I opened with that part of the story, right? As you gather more knowledge about tea and as you get involved in the tea culture, naturally you start to take on the role as somebody who's spreading the word of the tea, the gospel of tea, disseminating Chinese tea culture. So what is that? What are some of the aspects that we can highlight? So here's a few. So first of all, become very conscious that we have this role to play. And that when we're sharing tea with our friends and colleagues or guests, whoever they are, we first of all create a very sensory tea experience. So it's through the senses, and it's not just the taste, right? I mean, we've already been highlighting this. It's not just the taste. It's the other elements of the environment where we are consuming the tea. They're all a part of this as well. And they're all the things that can bring people in. Because we're all different. And so some people will really focus in on the taste. Other people will be captivated by the paraphernalia. Other people will be very interested in the different stories of tea and so on. So we can kind of use the senses, the 5 senses, as ways of into the tea experience. Even our auditory experience, which is the I'm not just talking to people about tea, but also, and we haven't talked about it here so far, but it's in part of the ritual could be the music, and like the guqin, the Chinese zither, and or the guzheng, or in China, but in other places there may be other instruments and other forms of music. They can all be integrated into the experience. That really helps stimulate people's interest in the tea. And also, the other element of this is we can't just be drinking, as much as we would like to, we can't drink tea all day by itself. We need to eat something. So tea and food go together very well, right? And you can see that in China, the way in which tea and food are often, the classic example would be the Cantonese yum cha. Yeah, the yum cha experience, which we even have here in the Chinatown. Well, not all in the suburbs of Australia now. Yum cha has become very mainstream. You can find it in just down the road from here. There are a couple of restaurants that I know. Go have yum cha, right? We eat the dim sum, dianxin, and you drink tea. That was my kind of first experience, actually, before 2008. It was way back in the late 1980s, probably, where I first went to a Chinese restaurant for yum cha, and I had Chinese tea. And I think we had bole cha, which is like this shopu, bole cha, but probably not as good as what I'm having now, but it was a unique kind of experience. So the senses, use the senses to captivate the interest and to tell the story of the tea. The other part, once people, like, for example, if people start drinking the Chinese tea in Australia and they get interested in that, if they really will probably want some point, they'll want to go to China, to go to the tea mountains, to go to the famous tea houses. And so the tea tours, the educational and fun tea tours can be really important parts of that experience as well. And I've been fortunate in the past, I have run some tours myself, and it was really delightful to see people from Australia, when I went to China, start to really, I saw them using all their senses when we were in the tea house and the sight and sound, and day after day of the tour. And by the end of it, they've already bought their own little teapots, and when they go back to Australia, they're starting to share their experience of tea in China with their family and friends back in Australia. So tea tourism is a very important part of the story. Not just in China, you can do tea tourism in India and Sri Lanka and Kenya, in Korea, and in many places. Okay. The other one here is we always have to keep up. We think of Chinese tea as a traditional kind of custom, but we're not going to get very far in this day and age unless we use the technology to enhance the experience of Chinese tea culture. And that can be very exciting. Now, we're in an age now where AI, generative AI, and other things, technologies are developing very rapidly. Wow, we should really think about how we can use these to enhance the experience of Chinese tea culture. Yeah, I mean, like we're using it today because I'm not with you at the moment. We're doing this via video, so that's just one part of it. So using the technology, and that's something I'm really trying to work on at the moment as well, just to figure out how best to use this emerging field of technology to enhance the Chinese tea cultural experience. Okay, so here are some other things that I'm just about to finish. Yeah, coming to the end here. And I've got the last 7 items. So these are some of the things I sat down, I thought, what are so I'm talking to you now, and I imagine you're a Chinese tea culture disseminator. What is my advice to you? Well, first of all, we really need to know our tea stuff. We need to know our tea culture, our tea, as well as we can. And it can be daunting because Chinese tea culture, it is so diverse. There is so much to learn. And I will be the first one to confess that I don't know everything. And I'm still learning. But if we're going to be serving tea to people on these tea tours, they'll start asking you all kinds of questions, right? You have to be prepared to give them articulate and good, well-informed answers. So you really got to know your own tea stuff. You have to become the tea expert. You are the tea expert when you're with these other people, right? At the very least, you need to keep a few paces ahead of them, right? Yeah, and also it's to realize that this tea learning experience, it's never going to end. Even a tea master, so-called tea master, will, they'll tell you that there's so much that they don't know, right? But we need to know our tea stuff. And of course, when we're talking to people about tea, we should be sharing our passion. I'm pretty sure that all of the people who are going through these classes and are really into the tea, you wouldn't be doing it unless you had a passion for the tea. I mean, if it's purely a business model for you, fine, you might make money out of it. But I think you'll enjoy it a lot more, and also you'll sell more tea if you really are passionate, and you can also show that passion to other people. It's infectious, right? Other people will get contaminated with your passion, and they'll want to learn more, and so on. And some of those people, not all of them, will also become, Chinese tea disseminators over time. And a good way to do this is to tell your various tea stories. So using stories, using narrative devices to talk about tea. So you can use lots of examples from Chinese history. There are lots of tea stories. They could be from your own personal experiences of learning about tea, and I've shared a few of those with you today. There are many more that I could tell you. So listening, telling your own tea stories, that can be a way to, because once again, humans love ritual. Humans also love a good story. We love stories, right? Storytelling. We are storytelling animals. Okay, now we have to all tell the stories, but we also need to respectfully listen to the other tea stories, to listen to the stories of other people's. So this also applies in the Chinese context. China has so much to tell the world about its own tea story, but China also should listen to the tea stories of other cultures. And then we can have this exchange of experiences through tea. So telling tea stories and listening to other tea stories. So here we have this, again, this 茶和天下 idea. Tea can create a platform for us to share our own views of the world that we live in through the medium of tea. The next one I've kind of already mentioned, that we also need to be continuously innovating and adapting to changing times. And in the case of China, it's a very exciting time to be in the Chinese tea business and tea culture, because it is undergoing a massive revival all around China. Tea is being, reworked and rediscovered and spread and developed through tourism and culture and so on and all this kind of stuff. It's a really very exciting time to be doing this in China. And I'm sure you're going to see lots of interesting and great things happen in Jingmaishan now that it's World Heritage. Things were already happening before, but now they have this this label of World Heritage. Lots of things are going to happen. So it's very exciting. Okay. And then through doing that, through knowing our tea stuff, through our passion, through telling stories, through listening to stories, to adapting and to innovation and so on, we can inspire the next generation. Because, we go back hundreds of years to Lu Yu, the tea saint in China. That's generations and generations ago. The tea culture, it has to pass from one generation to the next generation. If it gets cut off, that's the end of it. Okay. So it goes from generation to generation. So we all need to be inspiring and educating the next generation of tea aficionados and tea culture disseminators. And of course, while we're doing all of this, we must always bear in mind to take time to be mindful that this is a very exciting journey and that we should ourselves enjoy and savor our own tea journey as we go along. And that's certainly something that sometimes when we feel frustrated or the world, if things aren't going our way, just sit down with your tea, the best tea that you enjoy, savor it. Look at all the old photos that you've taken or videos, the memories. Sometimes I just look at the tea cakes and the tea that I have, and they bring back to me the people and the places that I've been in China and so on. And it feels great to have all those emotions, the emotional side, the emotions that are coming up. And tea is a part of that, reminding us that we should enjoy and savor our tea journey. And so there you have it. That's those are some of my insights that I'd like to share with you about sharing Chinese tea culture. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow.
Thank you.
Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Gary. You have shared too much and rich tea culture behind this cup of tea that we haven't known about, especially something very detailed. We do appreciate that. And yes, so when you have a cup of tea, I'd also like to ask you some suggestions and advices, because you are from Australia. My question is that, do you have any suggestions or do you have any advices that we can do better job to market or promote Chinese tea in Australia, since you are from Australia?
Well, okay. There are some challenges to promoting Chinese tea. I mean, even I said to you earlier that Australians love to drink tea. Okay, for a while, it was the most popular beverage, right?
Yeah.
Now, since the 1970s, coffee has made big inroads. Yeah, and Australia's coffee culture it's amazing. When I go to China, I see lots of coffee shops. I speak to the young people there. Usually, they're young people. Like, why did you get interested in coffee and all this kind of stuff? They and I'm not surprised when they say, "Oh, I was in Australia. I was in Melbourne, and I started to learn about the coffee." So the reason why I bring this up is because it's an education process. I don't know. My tea is probably your average kind of Chinese tea, a really nice, fragrant, beautiful tea. Most people will drink that and say that's really nice. But when you first have a cup of coffee, come on, your first time you had a sip of coffee, did you think this was really nice? Probably went, oh my God, this is so bitter. It's really horrible. Why do people drink this? right? But if you have one, then you have another one, and then it's like the tea, it becomes habitual. And of course, you mix it with milk and sugar and other things, right? So it's an education process. It's unfortunately in Australia now, the main way to drink tea is just with a tea bag, right? So just chuck the tea bag in the cup, get some hot water. It's very simple, right? Chinese tea is more complicated, especially when we start to get to this level of appreciating, using a gaiwan, using a teapot, a Chinese teapot, and using the gongdao bei, all this stuff. It requires more knowledge, and so that's what I found with. So I mean, I can't really give you any ideas here because I've been thinking about this a lot myself over the years. It's an education process. There is a market for Chinese tea, obviously, in Australia through the Chinese community. There's a very large Chinese community, and there are tea stores in Chinatown and elsewhere in the big cities. You can go and buy pu'er tea, stuff like that. But that's mainly for the Chinese community who already are educated. They already know how to brew it. If you get a Chinese, I haven't got one here, here, you get a Chinese tea cake, and you show it to somebody like in Australia, the first thing they say, what the hell is that? Say, that's a Chinese tea. And they say, well, you'll need a very big teapot to put that in there. Well, I said, you don't put the whole thing in. You just take a little bit, and then you do this and this and this. They go, well, that sounds very complicated. I just use a tea bag. So when we're promoting the Chinese tea, we have to do more than just the actual tea. You've got to this is a package. It's the culture, it's the way of doing it, it's the sociability, and that takes time and effort. And it's not something that you can do just in a day. So people getting involved in the tours to China, and in their experiences in China, going to a Chinese tea house, going to a Chinese tea garden, learning about the tea, that can get them into it. And I did that myself. I mentioned that. And I had the people in my tours, they got captivated with the tea. Then what happened? They went back to Australia, and for the first couple of days, they told me, I shared the tea with my friends and family. But then they weren't really interested. And then I kept having Chinese tea and then I started losing interest because no one else was, because what they really enjoyed about the tea experience was the social aspect with the other people, right? Because that's how we did it in the tea tour. And then back in Australia, the flame went on for a little while and then it died out, right? Now, so then I realized that, well, what those people need, like if they were in Perth, they need a tea community. We need to develop tea communities. And so I did this for a little while too, but then I had to stop for other commitments. We had the tea club. And then once a month we would get together and we would share tea, and people would take turns in brewing the tea. That was a way to keep them going, right? keep them going. Yeah. So without that tea community, they kind of lost interest. So yeah, that would be my advice, my way of thinking about it. There is a very well-established tea business in Australia. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. They're called T2. T2. That business was created maybe a decade or so ago.
Yeah.
They have tea stores all over in the shopping centres in Australia, and they sell all kinds of tea from all around the world, and even pu'er tea. And I went. Well, it's not very good quality, nothing like the great tea that we have, but they've done really well, right? But they're not selling a tea culture experience. They're just selling tea in tea bags, all loose leaf tea. Most of the tea, a lot of the tea is mixed. It's a pinpeida, right? It's mixed tea with floral elements and so on, which is what people really like, right? So that worked really well. The tea stores, they show us what T2 shows us is that there is a strong interest in tea even to this day. How we can then what do you call it? Work with that interest to find inroads for Chinese tea culture, well, that's another question. I think we can do it, but it would have to be, we would have to be, I know we have to start from a small base and work gradually, because it's a kind of an education experience as well. People need to be, the first of them be hooked on the tea, then they need to be taught how to appreciate the tea, and they have all that ritual and the other aspects with it. Then you need tea clubs. You could probably do this online as well. So people, I don't know. There are people who I know in China who are already doing this. They are using this method of tea culture and the tea artisan, the craft of the tea, of making the tea as well. And they're doing that, and then they're building up communities on YouTube and other platforms in Europe and elsewhere, and that's the way they kind of make a market. And then when people have enough interest, they come to China for a tour. So it's kind of seems like a laborious and hard way to do it, but yeah, I don't know. What's your experience? Anyone want to share your insights with this?
Well, Dr. Gary, thank you very much. I think you give us too much confidence, that also give us some passion-driven power. Education is very important, no matter it's offline, especially now online is very necessary and flexible. We can do that. Actually, I have already contacted the woman who is the Australian Tea Association chairman. I think she is the chairman of that. So I'd like to discuss further with her, especially you mentioned education is the key, with passion, with to build the community and to share the tea's social ability. That's very important.
Yeah.
We totally agree.
I think what you're doing is great, Mabel, and becoming aware of your tea education classes and everything. Fantastic. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're an inspiration too, right? You're an inspiration. And so so now I have another idea. Now we're brainstorming. So here's another element that could be of interest. So the tea, some people like competition. Why is sport so popular? And other things like competition. So when you've got enough people interested in it, the tea ceremonies, the 茶艺表演, and having a kind of competition around those kinds of things, where the women and the men can dress up in beautiful in costumes. It could be Chinese costumes. It could be their own national costume or whatever. And then having something like that, I don't know. That could be a way to stimulate interest. That's probably more down the track. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, to do some international tea competition, focus on Chinese tea, but it's not the time. So hopefully this year we can start that competition, but in a innovative way. Yes. So yeah, thank you, Dr. Gary. I'd like to ask Barbara, do you have any suggestion or do you have any question to ask Dr. Gary?
Thank you very much, first of all, for very, very nice lecture, amazingly structured, really very, very nicely summarizing and bring us the new views, how we can actually look at the tea and tea culture. For me, it was really also very, very nice because, as I said, I was born into tea culture because my parents have a business which is older, like me, in Slovakia, so in the middle of Europe, where basically there was no tea culture before. But as my parents get the time, they were 25, they were gradually interested in tea and bonsais. They started to travel to Asia, bring it back. That time there was nothing. There was just the herbal tea, maybe the black tea. But I think already 25 years ago, we started with Kung Fu Cha. So for me, it's a very normal part of life. And through the life, I also met various customers. The knowledge was really developing last 20 or 25 years. And sometimes I don't even know how to cope with these changes because for me, it's something completely different. And for example, we have customers who had their first dates in our tea house. Now they are bringing their 30-year-old children. And slowly there are new generation. It's around 35 years. So it's it's exactly where somewhat 2 generations, 3 generations
Yeah.
are
Well, your
mixing
parents,
together.
you're the next generation.
I am the next generation. Exactly. I'm no, I am the second
Now you have to
generation. My
train the
parents are
next.
still
Now you need to train the next generation.
exactly. We still don't have the children, but maybe we will see. Even though we also see
sure
how
they will.
tough the generation exchanges actually are. So it's like separate things. But also sometimes I face to myself what is tea ceremony for me, how to introduce it, how different it is to meet people who have never encountered good tea or tea ceremonies, because exactly they drink a tea from tea bags. But for example, in Slovakia, we also, because this activity of my parents, we do have very strong knowledge. Our customers, the normal people, have quite strong knowledge of various teas. They know there is pu'er, they know something about the tea ceremony. While in Germany, where my husband comes from, it's a little bit less developed when it comes to tea knowledge, because they associate it much more with the desserts and cakes and this tea at 5. This Western Europe is more, at least from my understanding, from my feeling, is not yet so deep in the tea ceremony or this kombucha. Now I mean this kombucha preparation of the tea. Then, for example, my country. So I also have to. It's very interesting to always see these differences. But I would suggest also to Mabel what you said. We in fact teach hotel academies where the students who are preparing to be waiters in the future. And we started to teach at these hotel academies the Kung Fu Cha. And we teach them about the tea and the variety of the teas. And then one school, in fact, once per year is organizing a tea competition for the students. So for young people, they are willing to learn. They want to be good at something new. They do a Kung Fu Cha as one discipline, and then a modern drink with matcha as the other drink. So it's like balanced, that there is this traditional way of Kung Fu Cha, or they also can pick different, but they always pick Kung Fu Cha as a tea ceremony, and then the modern drink in shaker. And we found it, and exactly we are the judges, and there's a winner at the end. But all in all, it motivates the whole. Not the whole, because not at every school, but a lot of children in their 15, 16 years old, the future waiters, the future leaders of the restaurants, in the hotels, in the good restaurants, etc. And with that, we also feel that we bring now this tea culture to young people who would maybe bypass it differently. So maybe for inspiration, if you have also these young people, it's not a bad idea. I would like to also ask you maybe if you could share the presentation, just so I don't forget, because in case you are willing to share your presentation, I'm very happy to maybe read it through before I have like some talk to people to go through your points, because I think it's very,
Sure.
very nice. And also your input for the Australia. I've never really encountered never really thought about the tea knowledge or tea drinking way in Australia. So it was very nice.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. Also, thank you, Dr. Gary, for your wonderful discussion. We also have students from, offline at Jimai Mountain now. Yes, I think definitely they would like to ask question as well. Yes, please.
Yeah. Hi, Miss Dr. Gary. Yeah, I'm Cici from Chongqing City. Yeah. So glad to meet you here, and I'm so honored to have the chance to learn from you. Yeah, but I want to know more detail about how about detail ways how we can go out like a package. Just some more detail.
Well, I think that's a part of building up a business which is engaged with a community through tours, but also online, and then posting information about the tea, having tea forums, building up a community. Yeah.
Community.
And then building up a tea community, and on the basis of that, you're educating people about the tea. Obviously, the most important thing is that people will enjoy enjoy what they're doing, right? They enjoy the learning experience. So it has to be done in a way that's thoughtful and paying attention to the way that people learn things and what they want. It's meant to be an enjoyable experience. It's not like to be going back to school, and having exams and all that and going, oh my God, what am I doing here? It's the pleasure. That's why I emphasized at the end there, go back to our savoring our tea journey and the enjoyable experience. But with that in mind, yet we can structure a whole course on tea, learning about Chinese tea, learning about different tea cultures in the world, and the tea paraphernalia, the tea things that go along with it, and then how to store the tea, how to appreciate the tea, how to serve the tea, and so on and so on. Yeah, I think it just takes time, and we're all in the early stages. But this is what I was saying. Now we can use the technology. We can use the technology to reach out and bring people together virtually. I think that could play. I already know that there are people doing this.
Social media. So it's all
Yeah,
very
using
good.
social media.
New tool.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Gary. Nice to meet you. I'm Sarah. I'm from, the Ningbo. I don't know if you ever heard of that place. It's in Zhejiang
Sure.
province. Yeah.
Sure.
This is a province
Sure.
where it grows the Xihu Longjing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you very much for the sharing just now, and we enjoyed it a lot. And we also know some knowledges we've never heard before. And my question is, as far as I know, Australia is a country king of coffee.
咖啡王国。
他们爱喝。So what about you? Do you prefer tea or coffee? And I want to know your reasons.
Well, actually, yeah. Well, I think now the statistics indicate that tea consumption, coffee consumption in Australia, it's about 50-50. It's about 50-50.
50,
Yeah.
nice.
But if you go back to the 19th century, coffee wasn't consumed very much in Australia. It was mainly tea.
Wow.
The Australians were mad about tea. And as I said before, they drank more tea than anyone else in the rest of the world. There was coffee that was being drunk, but that was mainly from the people who came from Germany. They were already drinking coffee. But Australians were drinking tea. The coffee didn't make the inroads into Australian culture until after the Second World War, in the 1950s. What happened was that many people, because after Europe was devastated, right, from the war, many migrants, refugees, they came to Australia. Where did they come from? They came from Italy. They came from Greece. They came from Lebanon and those places. They came to Australia, and what do we know about those places? They drink coffee. They drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
And Italians, right? They are the masters of making coffee, right? They created the entire modern coffee culture. It's basically coming out of Italy, right? The espresso machine, the barista culture, even the words we use, the latte, cappuccino, it's all Italian, right? It's very fascinating, the history of coffee. I'm interested in everything. So I've learned a bit about coffee history. But here's the interesting thing about coffee. And I always get into arguments with people about this. I love coffee, and I have coffee every day, usually. Sometimes I go down to my local barista and I get the flat white. In China, they call it aobai. You've heard of this term? Yeah, that was invented in Australia. It was invented by an Italian migrant who had like a cafe in Sydney, and he just invented this way of and he called it a flat white. And it's become like for a long time in China, I could never get it. No one knew what a flat white was, but now it's all over the place. And even in Starbucks, you can get the aobai, right? So popular now. But the thing about coffee is there a coffee culture? Of course, there is coffee culture. But is there a way of coffee? Is there a cafe dao? You know, the character dao. Is there a cafe dao? Well, I would put it to you,
Well, really,
Mayo, there is no coffee dao. Nothing compared to the richness of the cha dao. People will try to argue, oh yes, there is a cafe dao, and you can string a few things together, and yeah, but when you put it up against the whole, I just say, well, let's get all the books on the Chinese, and then we can expand even the Japanese, the Korean, the cha dao. Let's see how many books there are, and we pile them up. I think you'll find a massive pile of books and articles on the Chinese way of tea, and a very small or even non-existent pile on the way of coffee. So there's something about tea which is really deep and in-depth, right? And you can even see that in where you are in Jingmai Shan. It's the ancient tea trees. There are ancient coffee trees in Yemen, I believe, and where coffee originated. But there's nothing. Those trees, as far as I gather, and I'm probably a bit of ignorance here, but I don't think my basic understanding is the culture around those ancient tea trees is pale by comparison to the culture that's developed around the tea gardens and the tea houses within China. Now, people have been drinking coffee for a long time, and there's a coffee culture, and coffee, like if we think about North America, it's hard to imagine thinking about the America without the cafe, without the Americano, the cup of Joe, as they call it, right? And all the stories. So coffee is kind of like, I think of it like this. Coffee is a good expression in many ways of a modern kind of American life. That's what was very attractive to people in Australia. After the Second World War, the coffee culture came, but also the other thing that came to Australia was American culture. Popular culture, the music, the basketball, all those kind of things, right? And America at that time, not so much now, at that time, it was associated with everything that's new and exciting and fast. And coffee could represent that. It could give you a big hit of caffeine and so on and so on. But Chinese tea is different. So Chinese tea is not like, when we think of marketing, I don't think we're going to market Chinese tea like an exciting, like coffee. It's different. But so coffee is like the 100-meter sprint, bang, you get a big hit of caffeine and off you go. You're on the freeway, because freeways were the invention after the Second World War, right? In America anyway. And the motels and the coffee culture and all that kind of stuff. Tea culture is more like a marathon. And it kind of shows you like, yeah, well, Chinese culture has been around for 5,000 years, if not longer. And Chinese tea culture has been for thousands of years, and it's still here, and it's ongoing. It's a different aspect. So in terms of the marketing, there may be something to do there. One thing that has changed, and I'm sorry, I may be deviating, but we have some of the innovations around tea are interesting, and they're controversial. So one of the interesting innovations in tea is what do we call it? The xin cha yin in Chinese, the new tea drinks.
Yes.
Or the bubble tea.
Yeah.
We call it in Australia, we'll just call it bubble tea. Now, bubble tea, like in Australia, there used to be a lot of tea houses. Many of them are gone now. They're kind of like they kind of died out. There are cafes everywhere. But when you go to a cafe, you can buy tea if you want to. But there are cafes everywhere in Australia. But you'd be hard pressed now to find any tea houses. But there were. For a time, tea houses were very popular. We won't go into the details of what they were like. They're very different to a Chinese tea house. But
Chinese tea houses.
The Australian tea houses were quite different they're quite more like an English style tea house where you go and drink tea in the old days, where the women would get together after they'd done their shopping and drink tea, stuff like that. But anyway, that's a different story. What I was going to say is that the bubble tea. The bubble tea shops in Australia, just in the local shopping centre near me. It's a big shopping centre, even a smaller one. These days, you probably can find 3 or 4 bubble tea shops in one shopping centre. I'm not sure about Slovakia, but of course in China they're all over the place now. So people, is it? I don't know. What do they represent about the tea culture? Yeah, I have my reservations. I know some people say, "Oh, it's just the next wave of Chinese tea culture." I'm not too sure about that. But there are some interesting things happening in that realm in China in terms of the bubble tea, and I need to learn more. But yeah, I have my reservations about, or I'm still trying to work out what the bubble tea phenomenon means for Chinese tea culture overall. Yeah, it seems to me it's different because, first of all, you don't make the bubble tea yourself. Just as someone else, a shop assistant has made it for you, right? And yeah, so there's no sociable aspect like with when you sit down in your home or another place and you make tea for somebody. You don't make bubble tea for other people, right? So that's one part. You can cross that off. Yeah, well, I'll stop there anyway. But there's some ideas. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Dr. Gary. Actually, yes, I believe that the new Chinese style beverage is now the wave which brings Chinese, I mean the economy tea, they brings much like the capacity or yield of income than the traditional tea market. And meanwhile, we think that, for example, the new Chinese style, the way of drinking the tea, also the fashionable tea wares, actually we can, the traditional tea industry can learn those styles, but we focus on those pure tea while we use fashionable way. So I think that's combination that we can learn from each other. And meanwhile, the new Chinese style tea can be also the trend to go abroad.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the bridge, or that is the middle that I think can be easier than the traditional tea. Either way, the most important thing is that even now the new Chinese style tea beverage, they use very good quality of the tea. They use very good tea instead of something additable inside. That's something good about the new Chinese style tea.
Yeah, and also it's just a try. I think in the future it will be more mature and better. Just the beginning.
Yes.
First try.
So this is a very good discussion that we can actually, this can bring a lot.
Yeah.
However, we have limited time, but I believe that in near future we can put another online meeting or offline meeting, and would like to discuss those topics further.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gary. So drink some tea, drink some cool tea, and we appreciate your sharing and your time, your effort, your passion especially. We experience your passion, your love, and we are so lucky to have you.
Yeah, and it goes both ways. Thank you very much. So I enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
Yes.
And of course, from Barbara, thank you for sharing the experience.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was all very,
I
very
hope I get an opportunity to go to your tea house one day.
I hope you're very, very welcome. I was very happy to.
Well, thank you all, guys. So I'm going to head off now.
Sure. Okay. See you very soon. Bye bye.
Zaijian.
Thank you again.
Zaijian.
Thank you.